Welcome to Carter's Retro Reviews. Today, actually I don't know what we're going to be reviewing, but it's off this VHS tape. So, without beating around the bush, which is what I'm about to go and do after we're done here, let's go and check out what is on this VHS tape.
Welcome to Carter's Retro Reviews. Today we're going to be reviewing a Real Bout Fatal Fury special for the Sega Saturn. In my first review, I introduced myself, my channel, and said, let's look at the highlights of the channel so far. It was a joke. But I've had a few more years to do a few more reviews, and plenty of opportunities to make a highlight reel. So here is the best of Carter's Retro Reviews so far.
I love the Fatal Fury series. It has its dedicated following for sure, and being one of the most beloved Neo Geo fighters means it's been ported to just about every console around this era. The Saturn itself got 3 ports: Fatal Fury 3, Real Bout Fatal Fury, and Real Bout Fatal Fury Special between 1995 and 1997. In order to get that many ports, it must have had quite a following in Japan because the 3 ports didn't make it to the West. I don't feel like it gets the same level of recognition as some of its competition outside of Japan either, but you can see why. No matter how good these releases of Fatal Fury are, you're always going to be comparing it to some of Sega's 3D fighters, or Street Fighter, or Mortal Kombat. But after reviewing a few Neo Geo fighters that were ported to the Saturn, such as Waku Waku 7 and Galaxy Fight, I'm happy to report that this port is rock solid. There's an overarching story to these characters in the Fatal Fury series, but most of them seem to be centered around Geese Howard, Billy Kane, Terry Bogard, and Geese's half-brother Wolfgang Krauser, with very little else. Even Rock Howard, who's Geese's son and Terry Bogard's protege, come in late to the series. There's no story specifically to this release, which does make this game feel a little bare, but to be fair, excuse the rhyming, have you ever played a Street Fighter for an in-depth look at the characters? I mean, that would be good though, a fighting game with a real extensive background of each of the characters and their motivations. You know, an RPG with one-on-one fighting elements. Alright, anyway, so here's the breakdown. Straight out of the gate, we're treated to an intro video that gets me more amped than a handful of Eckies. I see Terry Bogard getting his ass handed to him, which makes me smile a little because even though he's one of the Bogard brothers and an integral character to the story, he's also an overpowered fighter in just about every version of this game I've ever played. Menu presentation is pretty good. Everything about it is, typical Fatal Fury, and there's nothing particularly disappointing. There's enough on screen to declare the presentation to be exciting and one of the better Neo Geo fighters in this regard. Graphically, this game is good. I say good because I think of all the top fighters around this time, and you had to be one of 2 things. You either had to be a 2D fighter with super moves that were way over the top and took 3/4 of the screen and combos that were so ridiculous they created their own logic and that they could only exist in that sort of video game. Or you had to be a 3D fighter with perhaps a more grounded approach to fighting like Last Bronx or Dead or Alive, with graphical sheen that was really taking hold at the time. And this game, while it doesn't have any negative aspects directly, was also not doing anything outstanding. It had the grounded combat of a 3D fighter that Sega was bringing to the table, but it was in 2D. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't have any glitching and the detail is good and the use of colour is effective. There's no real complaints here. As well as compared to the previous game in the series, there's been a number of improvements with redrawn sprites and new backgrounds. Even if you compare this game to another SNK game released around the same time like King of Fighters 96, the only immediate difference graphically are the backgrounds, which look a little more detailed and busier in King of Fighters 96. It feels like there are more subtle touches here, which is nice, but with King of Fighters it's more immediate. The sound effects in this game really stand out to me. The hit that lands has a real punch to it, excuse the pun. The soundtrack in general is ever so slight in the background and not particularly memorable. It doesn't have the urgency or gravitas that a fighter really should have. I'm trying to beat the ugly out of these opponents. I need something that will have me pumped. Not whimsy piano and strings. It's very possible to use these instruments in a game like this, but not the way that this was done. On its own, it's good music, but feels like it would be better suited to a level in a beat 'em up where there's high winds blowing through my character's hair and we're against the odds. In terms of gameplay, there's not a whole lot to cover. You get Chang Xinzan, Lawrence Blood, Tung Fu Ru, and Wolfgang Krauser return from Fatal Fury Special, and extra versions of Andy Bogard, Tung Fu Ru, Blue Mary, and Billy Kane as secret characters, which really adds to the roster. But the hit detection, the combat, the depth of gameplay is pretty standard with the ability to move between the two planes. You can also destroy barriers at the edge of stages, which is pretty neat. It's a double-edged sword for sure, because on one hand you have Old Reliable. You want a Fatal Fury game? Here you go, and it's fun. Does it do anything more or different? No, not really. Okay, yeah, it has replayability for sure. Would I recommend this game? Yeah, I would. One would argue that this series has always been high quality, so it doesn't need to do anything different or special. And in a way, those people are 100% right, but it also does nothing to break new ground. If it was released in the West, it's not going to move consoles, but it is fun in its own right.